Why do we need to study all these ancient languages of the biblical world?
I think it's important to understand, Shai, that most of the people intersect with what they know about God and what we know about God through language. Language is the core of all communication, but it is much more than that. Most of us who are people of faith build our faith on things we learn through language, by language, and therefore language is crucial. And if you want to go to the very beginning of things, right? That is how the world began, through language. God spoke, and it was. So it's sort of poetic that we keep coming back to language because that's the origins of all things. And
Pinchas, thank you for throwing this map together for us. Can you just talk us through it a little bit, explain what we're looking at here and why you've put these labels on the map here?
sure. So this is kind of a lay of the land for us, people who know their Near East. This is a very familiar view. You should be able to identify the major land masses here. And so we have languages that are kind of overlain on top of each other. And I want people to realize that as we are going to be speaking about these languages, they all have their sphere of influence. They have their geographical area of influence, but they also have their temporal influence because as empires rise and fall, essentially, as one people group tends to dominate the entire region at times, the influence of the languages shift. So, for example, we have Egyptians, obviously, in Egypt, right there. You could see the Sinai Peninsula and the Delta of the Nile River. And so that's the foundation of things, right? But so Egyptians have their time of when they exercise their influence in the throughout the whole region, right? They're there basically. And of course, we're very much interested in the land of Israel, right? Which is very hard to find on this map because it's so small, but it's right there next to where the words Hebrew are. And so every one of these languages kind of shifts in the areas that they influence and in the time that they influence. And so this map does not really depict accurately because the eras shift and the territories shift, and there's a lot of overlap. So obviously Egyptians is spoken in Egypt, but not in Egypt only, because when Egyptian pharaohs exercise their influence throughout the whole entire region, other people groups essentially start speaking Egyptian too. And you will find Egyptian monuments and set up in places like if you visited, for example, the city of Jaffa, that I always think of a monument over there to the Egyptian pharaohs, which has all the hieroglyphs on it and things like that. It shows about relationship and connections between these groups and languages that interacted. So Egyptian to one side, and of course we have Aramaic, another bigger, slightly larger language over there. And that really is a group of languages we want to think about it. And we'll talk about it more in detail a little later. But of course, it comes from Aram, right? Aram, Syria. That's where we get the name from. And then it would be also very regional and it would spread throughout the whole entire area and it would influence a lot of other smaller sort of say political entities and it will have a huge influence on Jewish culture as well. And then you have the Ugaritic and Akkadian, which are I have them a little smaller with Hebrew as well. Hebrew is small because Israel is small. Maybe the influence is slightly bigger, especially for people who are listening to us today. I think their lives have been influenced by Hebrew a lot, right? And Hebrew had a big influence on the culture but how many people walking around the world today actually even know about Ugaritic? Like if I just ask people Ugaritic and they're like, what is that? Is that some kind of food or something, or Akkadian. Maybe if I start speaking about Akkadian, they're like, oh yeah, I did see some kind of movie that mentioned Akkadians or something like that. And so maybe a History Channel buff would know about things like that. But those are the languages that people very rarely hear about. Why? Because they're small, they're regional, and they're tied to a very particular era in which they were more influential in that part of the world in that era. And then from then on, other languages take over, which brings me to the idea of Greek, because Greek, while it begins out there in Greece and Macedonia and those islands, right? and those territories, it spreads all over the known world. I mean, it takes over Egypt. Yes, it takes over the entire Mesopotamia, and it goes all the way through Iran, Iraq, and all the way up to India. It's like that language takes over. And now it's spilled over everything. The entire Western civilization is built on Greco-Roman ideas, right? So now we got Europe, Northern Europe, everywhere. And America is a product of that. And so you don't always realize how things like that begin in this small area and they spread out. And so the effects of language can be very far reaching. And so this map is a little microcosm just to show us a little bit of kind of like where things began, but they didn't really stay there. So keep in mind that, times change, territories change, but the influence of language is a bit more liquid than dead territories and the countries to which they are traditionally assigned.
What Bible do you read? And how do you know it's the right one?
There's only one version of the Bible, right?
It might surprise you to learn that Bible translations led to many versions of Holy Scripture. Long ago, translators interpreted the Hebrew Bible, ensuring it would be enjoyed in many languages. But when they encountered Hebrew words they didn't understand, translators relied on their individual cultural context and used different words with different meanings unrelated to the original ones. This led to Bible versions that lacked the full, beautiful, original explanations becoming part of our history. That's why when you join our online classes, you'll get back to the source of the original Hebrew Bible to uncover hidden meanings.
Get back to the source. Join our online course today, where the treasures of the authentic Bible await you.
Click on the link and register to start your biblical experience.